What's up, you guys, and welcome to another episode of the Variety Views. I'm your host, the Variety Vendor, and I'm here to rebook WWE ECW. Now, when ECW first was announced to be brought back for one night only, one night stand, 2005, it was a huge success. And it was such a success that WWE thought about, why not bring back the brand? Because before ECW, the first ECW One Night Stand, they had the Rise and Fall ECW documentary, and that was huge. That was one of the biggest sellers of that year, DVD wise. So they decided to do One Night Stand, again on a huge success. So the following year, they were like, okay, we'll do it again, and this time we'll bring back the brand. Bring the brand back as a third brand on WWE programming. So originally, Shane McMahon wanted to have it as a web show on WWE.com, and you know what? That would have been like what NXT started off as, and the way that NXT was, it started off as being part of the Sci-Fi Network, and then like it moved a couple of networks until it just was like, okay, we're just gonna put it on WWE.com, and then from there they had the WWE Network, and it was exclusive to the WWE Network until now, where it's on the USA Network. So what I would have done was kept the idea of keeping it small and completely different from any other WWE show. Of course, with the fact that there are TV deals, because when that happened, when other networks were like, oh, we want ECW, that's when they were like, okay, we're not gonna have it on WWE.com. We're not gonna have it as a web show because all these networks are willing to pay money to have ECW on their network. So, of course, my hands are tied at that point, and I would be like, okay, you know what? I'll give it a shot. So, being on ECW, being on Sci-Fi, of course, the Sci-Fi Network is mostly about the supernatural. They have like supernatural shows, stuff about zombies and stuff about aliens and all that sort of stuff. So, of course, they want that, that kind of flavor onto the ECW show. And I'm going to give it to them, but not to the extent that the original, as the original show was. Well, as original as it was. So we start off with WWE versus ECW, the head-to-head, right? And before that, Rob Van Dam, of course, won the Money in the Bank, and he challenged John Cena at One Night Stand. So at WWE versus ECW, head-to-head, we have a sort of a draft where Paul Heyman comes out every few minutes, and he would talk about like his draft picks. And his number one draft pick is Matt Hardy. Now, Matt Hardy at this time wasn't doing much. He was floundering on SmackDown, having meaningless feuds. I remember his first match coming into SmackDown after his huge feud with Edge on Raw. He was feuding with Simon Dean. He was having weird matches with like Eminem and tagging with Tatanka and then Road Warrior Animal, and it didn't make any sense. So since Matt Hardy's not doing anything, and at that time he was still a babyface to the point where people were cheering him, they were actually invested in him. He wasn't just a meaningless face that was there, just there. The fans actually wanted to see him. So you know what? Put him on ECW. And the second pick would be Chavo Guerrero, because Chavo Guerrero again wasn't doing anything on SmackDown. And After his feud with Chris Benoit, he went back to the cruiserweight division. So if you're going to put him in the cruiserweight division, I say have Chavo Guerrero take the cruiserweight title with him to ECW, because that is something ECW was, and Paul Heyman can even talk about this, where he would say like, hey, WCW might have made the cruiserweights famous, but Paul Heyman was the one that brought the cruiserweight style to the States. He's the one that brought the Lucha Libre style to the States. And it's true. Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, Conan all broke in through ECW. And also another pick is Gregory Helms. Another person that wasn't doing much on SmackDown. He lost the title to Chavo Guerrero after a year-long feud. Well, not a year-long feud, a year-long title reign. And so I think him in ECW would actually work. And he's the kind of guy that was so ready to actually go forward and actually break out of the cruiserweight mold. And I think in ECW that would work for him. And that is pretty much it. Those are the 3 drafts. I wouldn't make the show longer than an hour. Just keep it an hour long. And the matches on the show would be a battle royal. I would have like a battle royal on the show. Just a fun little thing, fun extreme battle royal where people just getting destroyed and everything like that, with the winner getting a future title shot for the new ECW title. And the main event being RVD, Sabu, and Sandman, the ECW originals, going up against the faces of WWE at the time, John Cena, Randy Orton, and Rey Mysterio. And of course, Rey Mysterio and Randy Orton they've been feuding for a while, so that is the reason why RVD, Sabu, and Sandman win the match, because of Orton and Mysterio not being able to coexist. Now we go on to ECW One Night Stand 2. I would change the name of that. Maybe change it to Heatwave, ECW Heatwave, since it's one of the bigger names of pay-per-view wise when it comes to ECW. Whenever you think of ECW, so I would change it to Heatwave, and we start off the show with CM Punk. CM Punk making his debut against Tajiri, because Tajiri had a one-night contract. He left about a year prior to this. So Tajiri coming in just to put over CM Punk and then leaving, I think it would be fun. And, Muay Thai kicks and all that sort of stuff. I think it would be an enjoyable match, and it would be a great way to start off the show. After that, we got a 3-way dance for the Cruiserweight title. Super Crazy versus Gregory Helms versus Chavo Guerrero. And I did say before that Gregory Helms was ready to break out of the Cruiserweight division, and I think this can be his final match as being part of the Cruiserweight division before moving on. And after that, we got Matt Hardy and Sandman going up against Edge and Mick Foley. Now, Matt Hardy and Edge had their feud, in my opinion, was feud of the year when it comes to WWE programming in 2005. So I think it would be apropos, especially since they kind of planted seeds in One Night Stand 2005, where the fans were pretty much chanting for Matt Hardy, and Paul Heyman was did his infamous promo at that time. So Matt Hardy going up against Edge one more time, and then getting his revenge over Edge in a tag match. It doesn't hurt Edge, and it kind of elevates Matt Hardy. So Matt Hardy and Sandman beating Edge and Mick Foley, and of course the idea being that that Mick Foley is Mick Foley and Sandman. Like, Mick Foley's biggest feuds in ECW were against Sandman and the franchise Shane Douglas, and also Terry Funk. So I think Mick Foley against Sandman one more time. I think it would be something the fans would want to see. And plus, you got Sandman in a match rather than just a random run-in. So yeah, I would do that thing. The next match would be Randy Orton versus Tommy Dreamer, and the guy that embodies ECW versus the guy that embodies WWE. I think that would be a fun little match. And of course, you can have Randy Orton win at the end. Tommy Dreamer was always the kind of guy that always looked better when he loses rather than he wins. And it's something that I think the fans would just go crazy all over, with Randy Orton beating Tommy Dreamer at the end, and it's just cheating and to win, even though that it's an Extreme Rules match. But Randy Orton kind of using Beulah against Tommy Dreamer. I think that they can do so much crazy stuff with that. And then we got Jerry Lawler versus Terry Funk. Yes, a rematch from Memphis, from the Memphis days. Terry Funk and Jerry Lawler had wars in the 80s. And what better way to have Jerry Lawler on the show than to face his old rival? And I just think that they can have a great match. It doesn't have to go long. And also, they don't have to do much. You can do... And the other thing is that Terry Funk and Jerry Lawler did have a match a few years ago. And Terry Funk was in his 70s. And he had a match with Jerry Lawler. So, 10 years before that, I think that they can have a fun match. And of course, you do Jerry Lawler doing the fireball spot, which was huge in Memphis. Do it on Terry Funk, and Terry Funk can do that thing with it's like, oh my eye. Terry Funk was always great as garnering sympathy. So I think Jerry Lawler would come out looking like a massive douchebag in a match like this. So yeah, Jerry Lawler and Terry Funk, with Terry Funk going over at the end, getting that rise from the fans. After that, we got the World Heavyweight title match on the line, Sabu versus Rey Mysterio. Same exact match that they had at One Night Stand 2, but the only difference is I would have Rey Mysterio go over clean. Just have Rey Mysterio go over clean. It doesn't, they don't have to have a screwy finish, because Sabu wasn't gonna, be a huge star in WWE programming. Either way, even though that in the way that I would book things, I would have ECW be its own entity. And finally, the main event, Rob Van Dam versus John Cena. Same exact match that they had. And, except for the finish, though. I wouldn't have had Edge help RVD win at the end. I would just have RVD go over clean. Don't let anybody else take away from his moment, because that was RVD's moment. And it was ECW's moment. And it was the fans' moment. So I would just have it a clean win. So that is ECW Heatwave. Now we get into the brand itself and the people that would be involved. Of course, we got the ECW originals. We got Tommy Dreamer. We got Sabu. We got Terry Funk. We got the BWO. All these guys. Also, we got some new faces in CM Punk and Gregory Helms and Super Crazy, Chavo Guerrero, Matt Hardy, and we got Jimmy Wang Yang, Deuce and Domino, who made their debut in 2007, but they were signed by OVW at the time. They were in OVW, so I would bump them up to ECW, let them have a short run in ECW. Let them have a run in ECW up until the draft. the following year, and that's when I would send them over either to SmackDown or Raw. But I think this would be a good way to introduce them to to a bigger audience. Also, we got Jamie Noble, we got Shannon Moore, Paul London, Brian Kendrick, and you might be thinking, "Hey, you're taking so much away from SmackDown and Raw," because yeah, I also have Crime Time here, and Cody Rhodes, and the reason why I'm doing this is because instead of having guys like Kevin Thorne and Mike Knox and Elijah Burke and Sylvester Terkay and Great Khali and Khosrow Davari, have them be on SmackDown. Those guys are good enough that they can actually swim in the shark infested waters of the main roster. And the guys that I would have here on ECW would be people that are that have characters. That they're much more characters, and not just characters, but them being actually good wrestlers and the kind of people that I would actually see in the original ECW. And I'll get into it. I'll get into it some more a little bit later on. Also, we got Brent Albright, who had banger matches with CM Punk at OVW. So I think Brent Albright rekindling that magic with CM Punk in ECW would be just great. And yeah, like I said, also you got the cruiserweight division, and also Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes, I think he was in OVW at the time, and I think him in ECW, and talking about how his father was in ECW. He was in ECW for a little bit, and he didn't have to. He was there because he saw potential in those young guys, and now ECW is returning the favor by elevating Dusty Rhodes' son, the son of a plumber, and also we got somebody interesting. We got somebody interesting for the Sci-Fi Network, since the Sci-Fi Network wants monsters. The only person that I thought that would be great in ECW is Umaga. Yes, have Umaga in ECW. Now I was thinking about this. This was '06, and I thought about what if ECW signed a bunch of guys from like Ring of Honor, and guys that would have eventually gone to TNA. And one of the guys that came to mind was Samoa Joe. I would have loved if ECW or WWE would have gotten their hands on Samoa Joe back in '05. But it's '06. Joe has been, at that time, Joe was like one of the the biggest stars in TNA. So, my hands are tied when it comes to that. I can't have Samoa Joe on ECW. This might be fantasy booking, but I'm working with what I got, not what I'm like. If I had unlimited power, I would have TNA wouldn't even be a thing. It would just be ECW. So, yeah, and the first night of ECW, right after Heatwave, I would have Paul Heyman coming out and awarding Rob Van Dam the ECW championship, and he's saying that RVD is now the champion. And then, much like Shane Douglas in the last episode of Eastern Championship Wrestling, where that famous moment where Shane Douglas throws down the NWA championship after winning a tournament, finally beating Too Cold Scorpio, RVD kind of does the same thing by throwing down the WWE championship and saying, that's not the championship that I fought for. I am not the WWE champion. What I did last night or 2 nights ago on ECW Heatwave, that was just proving a point. That was just proving that ECW is superior. So you can have your championship back. I am now the ECW World Heavyweight Champion until somebody proves me otherwise. I will be the ECW champion forever. And of course, RVD gets popped later on, but we'll get to that. So on that night, Shane McMahon makes an appearance, and he says that he agrees with Paul Heyman's decisions, but Paul Heyman is not, he's not in charge when it comes to ECW. And Paul Heyman kind of is, taken aback. What do you mean? I was the reason that ECW is brought back. Shane McMahon says, well, sure, you might have had influence in bringing back ECW. But let's be honest, Paul. We all know what happened the last time you were in charge of ECW. And you might have been a huge positive in creating the ECW revolution, but you were also a huge liability for ECW to the point where it died. So, Paul, you have been relieved of your duties as general manager. And in your place is somebody that knows about ECW, that it was the reason why ECW went from being a circus act, a Z-level wrestling show, to being one of the hottest revolutions in wrestling history. And that is none other than the Last Outlaw, Terry Funk. And Terry Funk comes out, and he is the new GM. And from then on, Terry Funk pretty much undermines Paul Heyman. Now, a few weeks later, right after Vengeance, of course, RVD gets popped. So RVD is forced to defend his championship against the winner of the Battle Royal from WWE versus ECW head-to-head. And that man is Umaga. And Umaga has a manager. And that manager is Paul Heyman. Yes, I would bring back Paul as Umaga's manager. And for the past few weeks, heading into this match, Paul Heyman has been saying that he's found somebody that can fill the shoes of the suplex machine Taz. And just like how he elevated Taz, how he elevated Brock Lesnar, how he elevated Big Show, he will elevate somebody new. And that is none other than the Samoan bulldozer, Umaga. And think of it as just like what Paul Heyman did with Brock Lesnar, he's doing it with Umaga. Umaga just destroying people left and right. And they have the match, and Umaga beats RVD clean. And that's the last we see of RVD for a while. Umaga runs roughshod, and instead of December to Dismember, we have the biggest pay-per-view, the biggest pay-per-view name, the biggest pay-per-view title in ECW history, and that is November to Remember. We have it in November, right before Survivor Series. I believe Survivor Series was at the end of November, so instead we have ECW's show be in early November. Now, I should preface by saying that ECW is its own entity. Let me repeat, it's its own entity, which means ECW guys don't show up on Raw. They don't show up on SmackDown. They don't even show up on WWE pay-per-views. That's how much they are away from WWE programming. It's its own thing. So, ECW has their November to Remember. The show starts, and we have the BWO come out. Just like, since Sci-Fi Network wants, crazy characters, hey, the BWO. Every week they come out as a different character. They come out as vampires. They come out as mummies. They come out as aliens. They come out as everything that you can think of. And they will still be over because that's what they were back in, the original ECW, where every week they would come out as different things. And at one point they even come out as, on the show, they come out as the Blues Brothers of Destruction. The Blue Meanie comes out as Paul Bearer. Nova is, Nova Kane. And Big Evil Stevie Taker. Like, they come out as that. Have a little fun. Blue Pyro. It's just they're just having fun. And they get interrupted by the Spirit Squad. Now, the Spirit Squad, I thought that they were over. They were over as heels. And I think in ECW, them being kind of like what the BWO was back in the original ECW. Just like a goon squad that would always get attacked and would always get beaten up, but they still have great matches. Because individually, they're great wrestlers. One of them was Dolph Ziggler, Kenny Dykstra, Mike Mondo. There were great wrestlers on their own. So use them rather than sending them back to OVW because they were already established. So Spirit Squad come out, beat up the BWO, and then Sandman and Balls Mahoney come out and they attack Spirit Squad. So they BWO, Sandman, and Balls Mahoney, they have like a beer bash basically. And that would lead to an episode of ECW where they would have a match, 5-on-5, and with the Spirit Squad going over. Also in November to Remember, Scotty 2 Hotty defeats Nunzio. And Scotty 2 Hotty is exactly what ECW needed at that time. Because back in the original ECW, we had fun, fun wrestlers. Guys that would come out, get the crowd on their feet, where they would start waving and dancing, like the Public Enemy. You had a little bit with the Dudley Boys. So I think Scotty 2 Hotty is that guy. He's that guy that would, dance with the crowd. And you can you can turn this into a sort of a comedy match. But, once it gets going, it gets going. So it's a fast-paced cruiserweight match with some fun moments. We also have Crime Time with Layla as their manager, and I would have them come in as heels and slowly turn babyface. Because Crime Time were over. They were over back on when they were on Raw in 2006. But this is before their debut. So, I would have them here a little bit, and then, later on, they would get drafted to either Raw or SmackDown. But right now, these guys, they would be pretty much kind of like the Dudleys, where they're stiff. Shad Gaspard is freaking stiff with his opponents. And you got JTG, who is like this guy that he's this sneaky heel who would cheat and rake the eyes and all that sort of stuff. And that would be Crime Time basically. And they would beat up their opponents, put them through tables, and all that fun stuff. They would defeat Brian Kendrick and Paul London on this show. Also, we have for the Cruiserweight Championship, one of the most underutilized guys in WWE history, Jamie Noble, and I would have him face Jimmy Wang Yang because I remember them having amazing matches on Velocity and on SmackDown. They have such good chemistry. So Jamie Noble goes over Jimmy Wang Yang for the Cruiserweight Championship. We got the Hardys. Yes, Matt and Jeff Hardy reuniting in ECW. And the idea being that Matt Hardy has a mystery partner going up against the tag team champions, Deuce and Domino. Yes, ECW has a tag team division at this time. And Deuce and Domino are the tag team champions. And they're defending against Matt Hardy and his mystery partner, who is the returning Jeff Hardy. So, November to Remember, living up to its name. Jeff Hardy returns after after his time in TNA. And I do believe that he returned in, I want to say, mid-September. It was a big return, and he had a face-to-face with Edge. Instead of that, I would have him do a few indie shows, let him be in OVW for a little bit, elevate that, that brand a little bit, and then have his first appearance in WWE at November to Remember. And you have Matt Hardy reuniting with Jeff, going up against Deuce and Domino for the tag titles. And, the Hardys winning the tag titles, thus making the tag team titles much more prestigious. You have a big name, associated with the ECW tag team titles. And of course, Jeff Hardy was doing gimmick matches on Raw either way, so why not do it on a gimmick show, on a gimmick-based show in ECW? So you have a mixture of styles. You got, the gimmicks, and you got the straight-up wrestling. Also on the show, you got CM Punk going up against Brent Albright in a 2 out of 3 falls match. This would be the blow-off of their feud after a couple of months of them feuding and showing highlights from their matches in OVW and all that sort of stuff. So CM Punk finally defeats Brent Albright and earning Brent Albright's respect. So that is the whole point of this feud. So, CM Punk beats Brent Albright, and he goes on to gun for the World Championship. The main event, Umaga retains against the returning Rob Van Dam. A couple of weeks before November to Remember, Rob Van Dam makes his return, and he challenges Umaga for another match at November to Remember, and Umaga beats RVD clean. No outside interference, none of that, none of that screwy stuff. Umaga beats RVD clean. And after the match, we have another return. Somebody that was sidelined back in May. I believe it was May of 2006. Somebody that wasn't on One Night Stand 2 because of, his injuries. And this is where I would have his big return. Chris Benoit makes his debut on WWE ECW. And basically, he's next for the ECW title. And, he stakes his claim, says that the ECW title was the only world title that eluded his career. He's won the WCW championship. He's won the WWE champion. He's won the World Heavyweight Championship. And now he wants the ECW title. So, this builds to a special episode of ECW in December, where CM Punk defeats Rob Van Dam in a 20-minute classic. Give them all the time in the world. And thus CM Punk is now next in line to go after the ECW title. And the main event, Chris Benoit defeats Umaga to win the ECW championship. And this would be kind of the last time we see Umaga for a little bit. Give him some time off. He can come back later on, have a few matches before moving on to either Raw or SmackDown. Now we move straight ahead onto WrestleMania weekend. WrestleMania weekend, we have a big show. We have the big show. And we can call it CyberSlam or WrestlePalooza. One of the other big names for ECW. We can call it whatever we want. We'll go with WrestlePalooza since WrestleMania, WrestlePalooza. That's one of the weekend shows, kind of like what Takeover is, which is most of the time it's a lead-in to the big pay-per-views. You do the same thing with ECW. WrestlePalooza being the lead-in to WrestleMania. Starting off the show with Deuce and Domino defeating the Sandman and Balls Mahoney. This would be the last time we would see Sandman and Balls Mahoney. They can go off to the Indies. And this is pretty much like ECW looking forward to the future. Enough of looking at the past. This is the new crop of people that they would start building ECW around. Scotty 2 Hotty retains the Cruiserweight Championship against Jamie Noble. Scotty 2 Hotty won the Cruiserweight title earlier in the year, and he retains the title against Jamie Noble. Umaga defeats Cody Rhodes. This would be Umaga's last match on ECW. Umaga defeats Cody Rhodes, and Cody Rhodes would come in being managed by Tommy Dreamer. And Tommy Dreamer, for months would talk about, how Dusty Rhodes was a big influence in his career, and that little amount of time that Dusty Rhodes was in ECW, he was like a father figure to Tommy Dreamer. So now he wants to pass on his knowledge to Cody Rhodes. He wants to mentor Cody Rhodes. So Tommy Dreamer is in Cody Rhodes' side, and Cody Rhodes' character would kind of be like what Tommy Dreamer was in the original ECW, where Tommy Dreamer came in as the pretty boy, and the beatings that Tommy Dreamer took is what made Tommy Dreamer in the original ECW. So that's what I would do with Cody Rhodes. Him coming in as a pretty boy, and, for weeks, he would get, beaten up by Sandman. And there would be an episode of ECW where Cody Rhodes gets the 10 lashes. And at one point, Tommy Dreamer wants to takes Cody Rhodes' place, but Cody Rhodes is like, no, I can take this. I'm hardcore. And Sandman just, gives the lashes to Cody. And at the end, Sandman, he respects Cody. Cody earned Sandman's respect. And another person would be, another person that Cody Rhodes would earn the respect of would be Terry Funk and Balls Mahoney. Balls Mahoney would, hit him with a chair shot. And Cody Rhodes would actually take it and fire off of it. With Terry Funk just keeps putting Cody Rhodes in matches every week. He's like, you're not getting an easy ride on ECW just because of your namesake. No, you're gonna be put in the toughest matches in ECW, and every week Cody Rhodes shows up. Bandaged arm, or a broken knuckle, kayfabe, broken knuckle, or bandaged head. It doesn't matter. Cody Rhodes shows up every week. Chris Benoit even takes him to in a match for 15 minutes of Chris Benoit just destroying Cody Rhodes, and Cody just keeps coming back every week. And in WrestlePalooza, Umaga defeats Cody Rhodes, but Cody Rhodes is still on the rise. Despite his loss, he's still, he's still coming back. He's still coming back every week. The next match, the match after that, we got the Hurricane, not Gregory Helms, the Hurricane. Gregory Helms was great on SmackDown, but the Hurricane is a much bigger star. And this is what I would do with Gregory Helms. Bring him back. A few weeks before WrestlePalooza, RVD pretty much, he disrespects Gregory Helms, and he's like, you're nobody. You're nothing. And Gregory Helms says, well, you might think that, but you know what? At WrestlePalooza, you'll see another side of me. You'll see another side of me that I don't think anybody has ever seen. So the Hurricane comes out, and it's not the goofy superhero Hurricane. It's a much more serious Hurricane. He comes out with the mask. He has the long hair, but it's a much more serious Hurricane. And he goes up against RVD. Think the Demon King in Finn Balor. It would be kind of the same thing, but with the Hurricane. Going up against Rob Van Dam in a Falls Count Anywhere match. And the Hurricane beats RVD. Absolutely clean. After that, we got CM Punk winning the ECW Championship from Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit putting over CM Punk like $1 million. And CM Punk goes on to carry the flag of ECW. And this would be the last we see of Chris Benoit for a while. And finally, the main event. Crime Time wins the ECW Tag Team Championships in a ladder match against the Spirit Squad, the Hardys, and London and Kendrick. And this, I can't think of a better way to end the show, because if you have this match in the middle of the show, then you're having your best match in the middle of the show. I know your world title needs to be, at the end of the show, but ECW is different. That's what I would do with ECW to make it different than Raw or SmackDown, is by doing the unconventional things. And having your best match end the show, I think it's the right call. A ladder match with crazy moments and crazy spots. You don't think Kenny Dykstra is going to jump off a 20-foot ladder? You don't think Jeff Hardy is going to do something crazy? You don't think London and Kendrick would want to do crazy stuff in this match? Crime Time with Chad Gaspard, I can just imagine Chad Gaspard chokeslamming both London and Kendrick off the apron onto like a ladder. It's just going to be absolute insanity. And that's how I would close the show. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much, all the booking that I have to do, because I think from then on, you can't screw it up. Having a banner year, a banner first year, that's all you need. You then ride the wave of things to come. You still kept the Sci-Fi Network people happy with having the crazy characters. You got the Hurricane, you got the BWO, you got Umaga, and you got the fun stuff with Scotty 2 Hottie, and you got the Spirit Squad, and you got the straight up wrestling for the purists, and Brent Albright, Chris Benoit, CM Punk, and you got the high flying crazy stuff with the Hardys and London and Kendrick, and the Spirit Squad again, and you got also the cruiserweight division, for the wrestling, straight up wrestling. So you got a great mix of styles. So that's what I would do. That is what I would do with WWE ECW. And with that being said, like, comment, and subscribe. Ding that bell icon for more videos on the Variety Vendor channel. And as always, take care.